and you're ready for a new evening. We're happy to have Tim Svoboda with us from YM San Francisco. He's the coordinator for YM San Francisco Bay Area. He's currently the International Urban Mission Director for YWAM. He also served as the city coordinator for YM San Francisco and the Bay Area. Him, together with his wife, Carol, and the children, they serve in India from 1983 for 24 years. And what is amazing, what impressed me when I first met him, that he went by car from Lausanne, Switzerland, all the way to India to outreach and to pioneer. So he's a hero. He's the national director for, he was the national director for YM India, the South Asia Urban Ministry Coordinator, and the Chennai City Coordinator. And in Chennai, he developed about 17 focus teams that really work in many areas, like leprosy patients, slum dwellers, university students, urban middle class, Muslim, and other spheres of society. He was also the founder of Chennai Transformation Network, which is a movement that unites the Christians of the city for transformational ministry. He also served in the GLT for YWAM International, and locally, Tim has served on several San Francisco faith initiatives. So he's a pioneer, a leader, a hero, and I learned from him to embrace the city, to learn from city, and to serve the city, because now the nations are in the city. And I follow him on social media, and I see that even in those days of crisis, YM San Francisco is blessing so many people that are in need, poor and needy, and yeah, he's a great man of God. And you can see his website on ymcity.org with more resources that maybe he will teach part of it this night. And also you can see ymsanfrancisco.org. So who would like to pray for Tim? And yeah, to continue, maybe Miha from YM Mediash.
If she's there and she can connect, I know she had some.
She's here. Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Thank
Miha.
you guys. Yeah.
Pray for this evening.
Thank you, Jesus, for this amazing opportunity to broaden our horizons and to learn more how to lead and how to lead ourselves first, and then how to lead people to Jesus closer, and how to broaden your kingdom. I just want to ask you, Jesus, to bless Tim and to bless everyone, and to make this platform work, and that nothing will stop us from hearing and enlarging our knowledge about you and about what we need to learn here. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.
All right. Thank you so much for your prayers, and thank you so much for letting me come and share with you on this great course that's going on. I listened a little bit to Andreas and to Jim and Judy, and you've already gotten some really, really good material. So I'm speaking to you from San Francisco. I live right downtown, 3 blocks away as the mayor. Right behind me is the international headquarters of Uber, and across the street is the international headquarters of Twitter. So I'm right down in the heart of the city here. And our YWAM Center is also right down here in the heart of the city. And I'm going to be speaking to you today on engaging our cities with a loving God. And I'll just tell you a little bit about my story before we jump in. So I'm just sharing the screen with you here, and I might jump in and out of the screen. So we're going to be talking about engaging our cities with the loving God. And my journey really started back in Lausanne in 1975. You can see me down here, kneeling down here. This is a picture taken in 1975 at the School of Evangelism. And God called me and my to-be wife, right over here, to join this team. We were not the leaders of it. This man here, Wilbert von Locke, was the leader. And my wife is just going to come in here and pop her head in the screen and say hi to you. And so we were in this school in 1975, and the Lord spoke to us to join this team to go to India. And so in 1975, we piled into these two vehicles. You can see Paul Hawkins over here. Paul flew out with his wife Peggy, flew out to India, and the rest of us hopped into these two vehicles, the Peugeot 404 and the Volkswagen van, and we drove from Lausanne, Switzerland to India by car, going from Lausanne up to Hurlak, over to Austria, and then down to Yugoslavia and Bulgaria, and then Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. Took us 40 days and 40 nights. And we spent many years out in India, more than a quarter of a century. Our kids have grown up there their whole entire life. Our son was born there, and we helped to pioneer YWAM in India. And I won't have time to share a lot of the stories with you, probably very few, in fact, but you can read about it in this book called Footprints of Faith. It's on Kindle, written by Sonia Swoboda, and I will try to put the link in the chat, or if somebody can help me with that. I had it here, but I can't switch to my browser right now. But you can get it on Kindle for just $2.99. We've kept it cheap so that people in India can read it. That's the lowest price we can put on Kindle. But you can get up there, and it's got a lot of pioneering stories that would be really relevant to what you guys are learning about. And it's not written, all the stories are not written about my wife and I. We just have 2 chapters in it, but it's written by Indian pioneers and by foreign pioneers. And my daughter collected the stories and wove them all together in a beautiful thread. And as we talk about cities, I'm going to be recommending different books along the way. But a lot of my thinking on cities has come out of my relationship with Dr. Ray Bakke. I did my doctorate under Dr. Ray Bakke. My doctorate was on monastic communities, missionary compounds, and parallels to YWAM basis, restructuring for urban transformation. And I spent many years with Dr. Bakke. I'm still a close friend with him. And Dr. Bakke, in my opinion, is the guru of city ministry, from the powerless to the powerful and to everything in between. So thank you for putting that link in the chat channel. So you can just click on that link and get the book. So Dr. Bakke, a lot of my thoughts are coming from Dr. Bakke. I'm speaking to you from, I live in San Francisco. I live right, let's see if I can find the building. I live right behind this building here, where my pointer is, and the mayor's office is just right there. You can see the mayor's office here. And the YWAM Center is right tucked into this corner over here, in the heart of the city. It's a city of 800,000 people, surrounded by a metroplex of 8 million people, 9 counties, 101 interconnected cities in that 8 million. And our mission, which I'm teaching to you today, is on engaging the Bay Area with the loving God. And I'll be sharing with you about engaging your city with a loving God, and how we can go about doing that. We're not just one location. We are 11 locations. This slide here just shows 9 of them, but we're 11 locations now, spread across the San Francisco Bay Area. And as you hear me teach, I'll be saying things like, we see the city as our base, and we see these locations as our departments. So we are spread across the Metroplex, and we're just 11 locations for a city of 8 million. In my opinion, we should be at least 75 locations spread across the Bay Area. So I want you to think about that. And how does that relate to where you are? And what does that mean for engaging your location with a loving God? As I teach, I'm going to be watching the chat line. So if you have questions, feel free to just put them right in the chat line and I'll answer them as I see them. And I don't mind being interrupted at all. If you feel like you have to unmute yourself and tell me, slow down, or could you repeat that? I'm not seeing it in the chat. Feel free to do that. And if you want this PowerPoint, I'll be able to, I can send it to you. I'll just need to have you give me your email address and I'll get it over to you if you want it. So that's a little bit of an introduction. So I want to talk a little bit about Paul's twofold strategy for the transformation of the Roman Empire. Because I think this is really relevant to all of us, no matter where we are. Back in that day, you know, the largest city in the Roman Empire, and again, we don't know exact statistics, but the biggest city probably was Rome, with maybe 1 million people. Ephesus might have been 100,000, 200,000 people. Again, we don't know exact figures. There's different studies, different thoughts on the size of those cities. Today, some of our cities are as large as the entire Roman Empire. So when we look at cities like Tokyo, 37 million people, that's probably more than the size of the Roman Empire at that time. But so when I talk about Paul's strategy for the transformation of the Roman Empire, I'm talking about our strategy. This strategy can relate to where you are. And Paul had two things that he did. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the first one and then later on come to the second one. Number one, he had a focus on the small, medium, and large towns and cities. Paul almost exclusively confined himself to urban areas. Some were large, some were small. And when we look at where you are, and I have the list here of all your names and your locations, and I before I came on, my wife helped me to look at each one of your locations and the populations. Paul was an apostle who focused on the small, medium, and large towns of the Roman Empire. He knew, if I can shake the cities, I can shake the Roman Empire. Now, that's not to say that rural mission is not important. You're going to hear a lot of passion come out of me for cities. You know, when I was in India from I was in India for, all the way up until 2007, but in 1995, I stepped down from being the national director of YWAM India, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't know. I gave over the leadership to a wonderful Indian leader, Somana Ramprasad Dharam. Some of you may know him, Sam Dharam. If you don't, look him up and invite him to speak at your locations. He's a wonderful man. I gave over the leadership to Ramprasad Dharam, and I didn't know. The Lord said, give it over. But he didn't tell me what to do next. And I went through many months of wondering, you know, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And I was in an all-night prayer meeting on the eastern coast of India, in a small town called Mahabalipuram. And Paul Hawkins, the actual man who sent me out in 1975, was there in that prayer meeting in 1995. And I was laying face down on the ground. And we were crying out to God in a prayer meeting. And Paul Hawkins started marching around the room and he started prophesying. And he said, ask God for something big right now. Well, I didn't know, is he talking to me? Is he speaking to somebody else? But I felt like it was for me. My face was down in the cement and laying on the cold cement floor. Well, not cold because India is often warm. And as I was laying down on the ground, I said, okay, Lord, what do you want me to ask you for? And one word in 1995, one word came into my mind that I am still working on to this very day. God said, cities. And the map of India exploded in front of me. Not a vision, outside vision, but in my mind. But that has then carried on to the cities of the world. And I began to see cities are incredibly strategic. Our dear brother, Floyd McClung, who has taught us so much in our mission, he said, there's no escaping the influence and power of the city. Now listen to me. I'm not talking about just big cities. You're looking at San Francisco here, and I'm going to be talking about some of your cities in a little bit. Towns, you might call them. Size does not equate to influence. San Francisco, where I live, right here, is a city of just 800,000 people. It's not even 1 million people. But San Francisco rocks the world. Levi jeans come out of San Francisco. The gay movement comes out of San Francisco. The hippie movement was born in San Francisco. The beatniks were born in San Francisco. The tech revolution comes out of San Francisco. Apple launches their products in San Francisco. I call it the small city with a big mouth. And I suspect that some of you are in cities like that. They may not be big, but they're powerful. I remember being in Sweden, I think it was, and I went to a small town called Uddevalla. I don't think there was more than 50,000 people in Uddevalla. But what a powerful, powerful place. That's and a lot of wrong power, witchcraft and sorcery and paganism that was coming out of that little place in Sweden. Size does not necessarily mean power. Floyd says there's no escaping the influence and power of the cities. Cities have become the dominant social force in the world. Cities are the mountain peaks of society. Trends, ideologies, and fashions are born in the fermenting cauldron of city life and then flows down and out to influence the population. The Apostle Paul knew this. He wanted to rock the Roman Empire. So how did he do it? Well, he started going to Ephesus and to Athens and to Thessalonica, and he never went to Colossae, but Philemon came upriver to Ephesus and heard the gospel and then turned Colossae upside down. The island of Crete had more than 100 towns on it, and the Apostle Paul said, raise up elders in every town. He knew, shake the cities and we will shake the nations. Dwight Moody said more than 100 years ago, he said, if we reach the cities, we will reach the nation. But if we fail in the cities, they will become a cesspool that will infect the entire nation. Our cities, where you live, where you reside, are key for the transformation of your nation. And I hope that during our time together that I can bring a few thoughts that will help you to see cities in a new light. And most of all, that you will fall in love with where you live. I lived in Chennai, Madras, India, for 25 years. It's not the most beautiful city, but I fell in love with it. I now live in San Francisco for the last 12 years, and I'm in love with where I live. And it gives me life as I feel God's heartbeat for that place. So before I talk much more, I'd like us to just break up into small groups for just maybe 3 minutes and answer these questions. If you can copy it, copy it. It says the world is now more than 55% urban. So I want you to, think about that. There's 7 billion people on the planet. Is that correct? I think that's the right figure. Approximately 7 billion, maybe more. 55% are now in urban locations. So my question to you, for just a little discussion, it won't be long, what defines urban? And as you talk about that, keep this question in mind. What is the difference between urban and rural? And then lastly, as you discuss, would you classify the place where you live as a city, a town, urban, or rural? So could we just break up into some groups, and we'll come back in just take 3 minutes and just have a little discussion, 3 or 4 minutes. And you're starting to think about not just city, but urban. And when I talk about urban, I want to be very clear here. Most Western missiologists, most Western missiologists, when they use the word urban, they're talking about the poor section of the city. I'm not. I'm talking about the whole city, from the powerless to the powerful and everything in between. I'm talking about the universities. I'm talking about Twitter. I'm talking about the computer techies. I'm talking about the hipsters. I'm talking about the skateboarders. I'm talking about the homeless. I'm talking about the police. I'm talking about the school systems. The city encompasses a range of economic strata from the powerless to the powerful, and it incorporates all the ethnic linguistic groups that reside there. So I want to make that really clear when I use the word urban. All right, so let me give you some statistics here. As you're looking at the sprawling metropolis of Osaka, Japan. 200 years ago, the world was 97% rural. Think about that. Just 200 years ago, the world was 97% rural and 3% urban. By 2020, the world has become 55% urban. Therefore, theologically, we have to ask the question, what is God up to? He's urbanizing the world. If God is urbanizing the world as a mission organization, we need to think clearly what's going on. Now, this is not to say that YWAM bases in a rural area should close down. It's going to sound like that because I'm so passionate about cities. It just means that we need to pioneer. We need people like you in this course to pioneer into more cities. Now I'm going to give you 4 kinds of cities so that it's really clear what I'm talking about. Number 1, super giant cities. Notice that little UA that's right here. I think you can see my pointer, but there's a UA right there. That means urban agglomeration. Urban agglomeration is a word that means the metroplex, not just the core, but the whole sprawling city, which may incorporate other towns and other cities in the larger circumference of the urban agglomeration. There are 35 supergiant cities in the world today. Now
Yeah,
think
your
about
screen
this.
is not shared, Tim. We see only you.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me try it again. Is it shared now?
No, still not.
Oh my goodness gracious. Why is this happening? Okay, let me try it one more time.
Damn.
Are you getting it now?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
that's
My-
okay. Thank you.
my- Thank you for interrupting. Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right, so 200 years ago, the world was 97% rural and 3% urban. Today, it's 55% urban. And you're looking at the sprawling city of Osaka, Japan. Now, there's 35 supergiant cities. You can see the small UA right here. All right, so the small UA that you see means urban agglomeration. And there's only 35 cities with more than 10 million people. That does not equal 55% of the urban population, but those are big cities. So what's a supergiant city? You're looking at the apartment complexes of Sao Paulo, Brazil. I think there's someone on the line here. Are you not from Sao Paulo, Brazil? This is a huge. Yes, thank you. Great shout out for one of the world's biggest cities, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Look at the complexity of just an apartment complex. Or Tokyo, that's 37 million people. You know, this is the subway map of Tokyo City. I spoke in their DTS and I was put in the hospitality house in Nagano, and I had to speak in the DTS in Yokohama, and it was all the way across the city. They took me on Monday and showed me how to get there by train, which took about an hour and a half or more. And then on Tuesday, they said, be here at 10 o'clock. And I went to the train station and looked at this map and felt like I had to go back to the United States to get my PhD just to know how to ride a train in Tokyo. This is the subway map. This is the underground, the overhead map, or the trains that are on the surface. So what's the point here? Super giant cities are super complex. All right? Super giant cities are super complex. You may not be called to a super giant city. I have never worked myself in a super giant city. I know people that are working in super giant cities, and sometimes it takes a special kind of person that can deal with that complexity and enjoy it and love it. So number one. Number two, as you look at Bogota, Colombia, is what I call not super giant cities, but giant cities. All right. And giant cities are 4 million to 10 million. Now, they're not as complex as super giant cities, but they're still complex. Okay, they're still challenging and they're still complicated, but they're not as difficult. They don't have the underground system or the subway system or the transport system like the other cities. You're looking at Madrid, Spain, which is around 3 million in the core and about 6 to 7 million in the surrounding area that makes up what we would call Greater Madrid. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful city. We would call this probably it falls into just like borderline into a giant city because of the larger metroplex. And then there's what we call, or Prague. You're looking at Prague. I think there's some people on the call from Prague. And my last name's Svoboda. My grandparents came from Czechoslovakia. But you're looking at Greater Prague here, 1.3 million people to 2.6 million people that are in here. And that would qualify in what we call mega cities. So the third type of city is what we call mega. So there's super giant, plus 10 million, giant, 4 million to 10 million, and then mega, that's 1 million to 4 million. Now, these are names that I have made up over the years. They don't follow the United Nations. They're similar to United Nations, but they're a little bit different. And I just did it because it was a little bit easier for me to follow than the United Nations delineations. So here you're looking at cities like Cartagena, Colombia, where I just spoke in one of their training courses before the pandemic broke out, or Detroit, Vancouver, Copenhagen. Mega cities are, again, they're not giant cities. They're more quaint. They're more communal. They're more personable. And so there's a different dynamic that you find in cities like this. All right, so you're looking here at Thessaloniki, Greece, 1.1 million people. I believe someone is on the call here from Thessaloniki that's pioneering in there, I believe. These are really, really key cities that may require, you know, when you go back to, I'm just going back a little bit here, but when you look at these bigger cities here like Bogota or Tokyo, you know, Bogota would require 75 YWAM centers. One YWAM center for Bogota? What can one YWAM center do for the whole city of Bogota? Or a city like Madrid? Definitely, we could have 30, 40 YWAM ministries going on in that city, whether they're centrally located or they're decentrally spread across the length and breadth of the city. Or Prague, and I'll talk a little bit about Prague later on as we go on. Or Thessaloniki, these are all big cities. Then we come to smaller cities. I think we're looking at, and excuse me if I say it wrong, Biarritz, France. And I think there's someone on the call from Biarritz, if I'm not mistaken. Biarritz is maybe, I think it's 25,000 people. Now, we wouldn't call Biarritz a city. It's a town, but it's an urban location, and it's part of that 55% of urban dwellers on the planet. So I want to be really clear. When I talk about engaging cities, I'm talking about Biarritz. I'm talking about Sivakasi, Tamil Nadu. I see James and Mary on the call from Derby, England, who come from Tamil Nadu, India. I'm talking about small places as well as I'm talking about large places. Now, these are, I call them frontier cities. And there's 2 billion people living in these small areas. And bear with me on these heavy statistics here. There are 4,355 urban locations that have a population between 100,000 to 1 million, with more than 1 billion people collectively. Now, listen to this. This is even more shocking. There are 40,000 plus urban locations like Biarritz, below 100,000, totaling 836 million people. I'm not sure how to say the name of this city. I'm sorry. I've never been there. I've never been to Biarritz. This is Uzice, Serbia. Excuse me. How do you say it?
Užice.
Thank you. Even when you say it, I can't say it. All right. Maybe 60,000 to 80,000 people living inside of this city in Serbia. Small, but probably very powerful. I remember when I went up to Norway to the Arctic Circle, and I believe the city I was in was a very small one called, I think it was called Tromsø, way up by the Arctic Circle. Small city, small. And the pastors gathered together and they had me speak to them. And I was so impressed with the power of this little small city called Tromsø in the Arctic Circle. Excuse me if I'm saying it wrong, Norwegians that are on the call. Or cities like, I don't know how to say this either, Flore, Albania. Someone's on the call. Can you tell me how to say it?
It's Vlora.
Flora, thank you.
Yes.
Flora, 190,000 people. 190,000 people. Not a huge city, but I'm sure very, very powerful. So when we begin to look at cities, there's a continuum of urban to rural. And the urban, we often say the urban ones way on this side of the continuum, like Tokyo would be way over here, see? And then as we come over here, maybe Madrid comes over here, and maybe Prague comes a little bit over here, see? And then Biarritz and those start falling over in this category here. And then sometimes it goes down really small, and we don't call them rural or we don't call them urban. This is the word I made up. We call them rurban. Rurban. So, you know, I lived in India for 25 years, and there's many small cities in India. Like I already said, Sivakasi or Udaipur or Ratlam or Bhagalpur. These are all small, Chengalput. They're all small towns, but they're not rural. Some of the people may work in the agricultural industry. They're not really urban, they're rurban. And they're also very, very key. One thing I want to tell you here, and it may be a bit hard to understand, but the smaller the city in the 1040 window, the fewer churches you're going to find. Missionaries often go to the big cities. Well, I'd like to take you to some small cities in India, in China, in Vietnam. And I'm telling you, the deeper you go into the interior, the fewer churches you're going to find per capita. There are very few churches in these backward areas, and a lot of missionaries, we don't even know the names of those places. Oh, we know Tokyo, and we know Singapore, and we know Paris, and we know Brussels, but yeah, who's heard of some of these smaller places? Flora, Albania, see? And yet they're very, very significant, because around every one of these towns are other smaller towns and countryside areas that can be influenced powerfully with the gospel if that city is transformed with the gospel. Wow. Any questions you're having? I just want to pause for a second and just see if there's any questions that you're having. I'm getting excited just talking to you guys because I know you're pioneers, and I see cities as the way to reach the world. And I'm going to give you some more statistics. I know statistics can be boring, but I'm doing this because you're pioneers and I want you to see the world in a new lens. Any questions? Yes, I will send you the PowerPoint. You will get this PowerPoint. Okay, one question is, when would you consider something rural? Great question. This is arbitrary. There is no universal definition of rural. Every nation in the world defines rural according to their standards. So when you go on to the UK census or the Norwegian census or the Romanian Census Bureau, they will have their definition of what is rural. For instance, in Japan, they say anything lower than 15,000 people is rural. Whereas Sweden says anything less than 200 is rural. So why the difference? It's because there's no scientific measurement for what is urban and what is rural. It's arbitrary up to each nation. So when I say 55% of the world is now urban, we are using the definitions of all the nations on the earth to know what they consider urban in their nation. And then we put that all together and we get 55%. And it's not me doing that. These are researchers that are tracking this data at the United Nations, or you can check out a good website called citypopulation.de for Germany. One of the best researchers on cities. Citypopulation.de. And I will put that in your chat right now. I believe that's the right website. If that doesn't work, let me know and I'll get back to you. All right. So when we think about the rise of the urban trend going on in the world, here you can see the different continents. And you see Africa and Asia being the lowest, but you look at the steep rise that's going on over the 50% level here by the year 2030. All right. So there's more rural countryside in Asia, but keep in mind that when you look at the total population of the world, Asia has the most urban dwellers. India is over 1 billion people. China's over 1 billion people. They may have a lot of people living in the villages, but because they have such huge populations, the urban population compared to the rest of the world becomes massive. So you want to keep that in mind. All right, so someone's asking, why do we find many missionaries in those huge cities rather than in small ones? Are there missionaries who make choices about locations by themselves without the Lord's guidance? I think there's many reasons why we find missionaries in the large ones and not in the small ones. I think one reason is transportation lines. Back in the 1800s, it was by ship. So missionaries already spent 3 months on a ship, and then they went to Calcutta, and they didn't want to go any further than that after a 3-month trip. Today, our airplanes tend to land in the big cities. So they get that attention. Number two, there's a lot of amenities in the big cities. The internet works better. There's more air conditioning. There's global westernized restaurants. You go back into some of these frontier areas and the healthcare, the hospitals, the roads, some of the roads are just dirt roads with potholes enough to swallow a whole car. So a lot of times on the road, you don't see cars, you see tractors and cows. And so missionaries have been reluctant to go into those areas because of the next level of difficulty that it often presents. So I think those are some reasons. And part of why I'm presenting what I'm presenting is to get you fired up for these small places. Now, when I talk about the lack of amenities, I'm referring to the 1040 window. In Europe and in America, the smaller the city, that doesn't mean there's less amenities. Most of us in the Western world, those amenities are there. In Biarritz or in smaller towns, Cornwall or wherever else, you can find those things. You may not find an abundance of restaurants, but you find enough suitable things that make you comfortable. So when we talk about the urban world, the supergiants, the giants, the mega, and the frontier. Now look at the map. Look at the map. And this is what the urban world looks like. The numbers that you're looking at are those big cities that I talked to you about. Karachi, Mumbai, Buenos Aires, Shanghai, Istanbul. But look at the dots on the map. Just look at India. Look at the northern plains of India. And these cities here, hardly you'll know the names of these. Same with Europe. Look at Europe and the density of urbanism that's going on. So in YWAM, we have this project called 4K, going into the omega zones. I'm introducing to you the 4K through the lens of urban. So just take a look, and this is going to be out. This data is not going to be up to date. So if this makes you mad, that's one of the purposes of it, is so that you get better research. But I'm going to show you what's called the urban population. And let me just look at the questions here while I'm rolling along. Yes, I'm going to come to your question about why I'm having an influence on a city. Thank you from Roseanne. Catherine says, what is the number of urban population in Europe? And why is the number of urban population in Europe and North America decreasing? It's not. It's rising. People are moving into the cities. So maybe the overall population's not increasing as much, but there's still a move away from the countryside into the city. You mentioned the lack of amenities in rural areas in the 1040 window, which is of course a challenge in the day-to-day, but what would you say the challenge of a city poses that a rural area doesn't? Yes, I might talk about that later on. It's a good question. Big cities can be very challenging. The pollution, the crime, the homelessness, the violence. I live in a neighborhood of 35,000 people, 25 languages, 8,000 people homeless, 3,000 of them on my front doorstep. We have every day at our front door at YWAM San Francisco, lines of people waiting to get into our building so they can take a shower. And we're dealing with it every day. We had our plate glass window busted 3 days ago. It cost me $1,700 to replace the plate glass window. But we keep those plate glass windows because we have an open theology. We don't want to have bars on our windows separating us from the neighborhood. We want to have windows welcoming them into our facility. Someone got mad the other night and threw a brick through our window. That was $1,800 out the door. Looking at Europe here really quick, if you look at what's in black, this is where YWAM is located. All right. What's in red is where YWAM is not located. So there's 111 cities in Europe of over 100,000 people. I could go down even further. I can go down to 25,000 people and include Biarritz, but it's a lot of data. From my knowledge, we're in 19 locations. Now, you may be in more because my data is a little bit out of date here from the last time I spoke at a European consultation. And to get this data is very hard. It usually comes in consultations like this. So watch as I flip the slide here and you keep on seeing the cities of Europe. All right. So I don't know whether you're still in Pristina, Kosovo. Maybe that's still going, maybe that's not going anymore. I don't know. And maybe you're in some of these other cities. Black is where we are. Red is where we're not. All right. So continuing on, looking at the Western European Act 1 circle, which is Spain, Portugal, France, and French-speaking Switzerland. There are 3,000 towns and cities in the Western Act 1 circle with more than 25,000 people. Okay, that includes Biarritz. There's 116 that are over 100,000 people. There's 2,884 towns are between 25,000 and 100,000. All right, YWAM is in 24 locations of 3,000. Now, I'm not saying we should be in all 3,000, but as pioneers, I want you to see the territory. If you don't see the territory, yes, we need to hear the voice of the Lord, and I totally believe in hearing the voice of the Lord, but the voice of the Lord comes strategically when we look at the territory. What general goes to war without looking at a map? One of the first things I do when I walk into YWAM bases is I look, what maps do they have up? Do they have a map of their local area? Or they just have a map of the world? See, some bases might have a map just of Nepal. Why? Because they're called to Nepal. Good on them. See, let's get focused. Let's get specific. Watch India here just for a little bit. I don't want to bore you too much, but here's North India. 189 locations above 50,000 population. YWAM's in 25. 164 yet to be pioneered. And I can tell you every one of these that I have on this slide are strategic. All the red, these are strategic. These are unchurched, unreached. Hardly anything going on in Christianity in these remote areas. I live in a city of 800,000 people. My neighborhood is 35,000 people. We have 2 YWAM bases right now and a third one starting in the neighborhood of 35,000 people, 2 separate locations. Why? Because we have 2 separate focuses. We're working together. We're the same family. But I got 35,000 people speaking 25 languages. The base that I'm leading works with the homeless population. My wife is starting another work in the neighborhood 3 blocks down from the front door of the YWAM Center to the 1,000 Yemeni speaking people that live in the neighborhood. Those Yemeni people will not come to YWAM. They're Muslim. So my wife is starting a new ministry going to them, and she's looking right now for a property in the neighborhood for a community center that would reach out to the Yemeni people, teach English as she learns Arabic. 2 YWAM centers we have right now. We operate independently. I don't want to say independently, we operate interdependently, but we have our own staff meetings. We have our own goals. We raise our own finances, and we're focused. Why? Because the more you micro down, listen to what I'm going to say, the more you micro down, the more the ministry begins to take root and gets traction. All right, I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat, and I hope that the technician can save this so I can update my data on my slides. Thank you very much for putting that in there. If you know where YWAM is in Central Europe, let me know, and I will update the information. All right, any questions on this? So Kiev, we'll try to get Kiev updated on that. Thank you. Any questions you want to ask? You're going to mute yourself. Okay, can you say again what you said about the more you micro down? I'm going to say it some more. But oftentimes, let me give you an example. When I moved to San Francisco in 2007, 25 years of my life in India. I love India, still love India. I moved to San Francisco, and the YWAM Center was primarily focusing on the homeless population, which is wonderful, 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 wonderful. And I told the YWAM Center, hey guys, I need some time, maybe a few months, to just do prayer walking around the area and get the context. I don't know the context here. I know India. I love India. I started prayer walking. In one of my first prayer walks, I walked out the front door of the YWAM Center, turned left, and walked a half a block. And I saw a Gujarati mandal. Now, James and Mary will know what I'm talking about, or others that are listening in from Bangladesh or India. A mandal is where they do their pujas or their weddings or their festivities. And a Gujarati is from India. It's a people group. And I saw this Gujarati mandala had the Om symbol on it. Right away, I saw the Om symbol, and I knew right away, because I know Hinduism. I thought, why, what's going on here? And then I started observing all the restaurants around me. There was tikka masala. There was pakwan. There was shalimar. There was Lahore kahari. There was chutney. All Indian names. And I began to then start walking and praying the neighborhood and then reading about the neighborhood. And I began to find a huge Indian population at our doorstep. And I went to the YWAM leaders and I said, do you know that we have this Indian population within 1 block of our front door? And hardly anybody knew. They would eat at the Indian restaurants, but they didn't make the connection. Why is there a restaurant here? It's not just because Western people like Indian food, it's because there's an Indian population buried in this neighborhood that if you don't look closely, you won't see them, because all you see are the 3,000 homeless people sleeping on the streets. Micro down, study. I'm going to tell you how to do that in the slides to come. All right, any other questions? All right, so I'm going to put in the chat here. Please email me. My email is tim@ywamsanfrancisco.org if you want the PowerPoint. And then I will send it to you. I don't mind getting your email. But when you email me, please tell me where you're from, what city you're working in, because I'd like to just know that so that I can keep up on it. All right. I'm going to share something else with you here before we go on the break. This is our website, YWAM San Francisco Bay Area. So you can put that in your chat, or I'll put it in your chat, I'm sorry, or if someone can help me on the technician side, I think I've got it. Let me see here. Yeah, all right. So I'm going to be teaching on this in a little bit, called Peoples, Places, and Passions. So you're going to understand this, but our website is built around this concept: peoples, places, passions. Every city, every town is comprised of peoples, places, and passions. We are launching ministries across the Bay Area in peoples, in places, and in passions. All right. And then let me see here if I can do something else before we head for a little break. Please look up this website, ywamcity.org. If you want your city to be on this website, and keep in mind what I define as a city. It doesn't have to be big. All right. If your center has some focus locally, you're engaging locally. Maybe it's a coffee shop. Maybe it's a skateboard ministry. Maybe it's a Bible distribution in your town. Maybe it's drama. Maybe it's street preaching. I don't care what it is. If you have some local engagement and you want to be on this website, send me an email and I will slowly get you on it, because I'm one person. And unless there are people out there that want to volunteer and help me, I can teach you how to add to our website. All right. And then lastly, another thing I want to show you here is the YWAM Cities Facebook page. Please like it. We post a lot of information here at the YWAM City Facebook page from cities all over the world. And I want you to post about your city. I want you to put up videos. I want the world to see what you're doing. I need help with your ministry. Or if you find it's not going out enough, send it to me and I'll put it up and make sure it gets out properly. So YWAM City, Facebook, and then YWAM City website I've already showed you. But I want to also just point out to you here, if you go to resources, at the top, it's called Urban Book List. Can you guys see that? Yes. Is the YWAM City website on your coming on your screen?
Yes.
All right. So if you click on that Urban Book List, you will get 100 plus books that I'm recommending on urban ministry. Now, some of them are Western oriented, some of them are Indian oriented, but these are books that have helped guide me over the years. Most of them, not all of them I've read. Some of them I have not read, but there's some real classics on here. Because I want you to be students of the city. And as you're students of the city, through intercessory prayer, you will just expand in breadth and depth of what God is calling you to do. So there's a lot of resources on this website that you can look at. You're going to be seeing later on, if you scroll down, there's a list of cities here. So if you, pick a city here like Craiova, Romania, if I just click on that, you're going to get a pie chart. I hope it's coming up on your screen. And there you're going to get a pie chart of the peoples in your city. Not all the peoples, but some of the peoples that are in your city. And we have the spreadsheets that give all the people in your city. Like if you just look at is it say Craiova? Craiova? Hope I'm saying it right. One of the things that stood out to me
Yes,
about
Craiova.
Craiova, thank you. One
Like
of the things
cry over.
thank
Cry
you.
over.
I won't try again.
No, cry. Cry
Thank
over.
Thank you. Thank you. One thing that stands out about it is look at the deaf community. 1,589 people that are deaf inside of the city. Do we have a deaf ministry from YWAM that's reaching those people? Many years ago in Chennai, India, we ran a deaf and hearing DTS. We had 9 deaf students and 9 hearing students. And I have to still say to this day, it was one of the most transformational DTSs we ever ran.
There is one going in Constanța
Praise
with
God.
that in Romania, but they had to stop because of the virus. But there was one going on right now.
Praise God. Praise God. All right, I'm going to stop there, and I think it's break time.
Okay, so good teaching. Let's take a break, and let's come back at 7:25. Okay, in our time, maybe 10:25 your time, team.
It's about
Leaders. And when I say micro, I don't mean these people are small. These people are powerful, but they're very focused. Paul was always raising up. He was always raising up others. Titus 1:5, the reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town. The island of Crete had over 100 towns in it. What does Paul say? He says, the reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town. Now, was there a church in every one of the 100 towns of Crete? I don't know. But there was more than one place he was talking about on an island. So he was raising up. He was the macro focus leader. He was raising up micro focus leaders. Lauren Cunningham is a macro focused leader. When Lauren Cunningham talks, it's like the world is like a mouse pad, a mouse tracker, whatever you call this thing. It's so small to him. But Lauren's effectiveness is only measured because of the micro focus leaders that are starting bases all over the world. If Lauren didn't have the micro focus leaders that all of you are, Lauren would just be a lot of talk. Okay. So the Apostle Paul was doing the same thing. He was macro. There are very few macro leaders, but there are many thousands and thousands of micro leaders. Okay. 2 Timothy 2:2, and the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, and trust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. So, you know, the Apostle Paul, one scholar of the New Testament says that Paul had about 70 to 80 people when you track all of his relationships, where he was either directly leading or indirectly leading or being mentored by or mentoring. So he didn't roll into town by himself. He had a team. He was a good YWAMer. Now we know we focus a lot on the Apostle Paul because of his macro influence, but his legacy was the raising up of those micro leaders like Timothy, who eventually became the bishop of Ephesus, et cetera, and rocked the world. All right, so there's two kinds of leaders when we talk about a city. And I'm going to focus here, I'm going to start over here first with what I call city coordinators. These are macro leaders. And I'm not going to focus on this very much because the focus I want is on micro. But city leaders are big picture people. Now, one of the things I often challenge YWAM leaders to is don't just be a leader of a YWAM base, be a leader of a city. The city is your base. Think the city. Now, not every YWAM base leader can do that. Not every base director is a city leader. A city leader thinks the whole city. They interface with other ministries. They initiate and get behind vision. They're door openers, not gatekeepers. They're not saying no to YWAM coming into their city. They're saying, come on. You know, you want to do King's Kids, you want to do church planning, you want to do skateboard ministry, you want to do deaf ministry, come on. The city is my laboratory. And I want you to grow here, whether you're on the base or whether you're in the city, which is the base. And I can talk about that a lot, which I don't think I'm going to have time in this seminar. But you can find an old article that I wrote. If you can't find it, I'll send it to you. It's called Break Up the Base. We went from one base in Madras to 17 locations, 19 locations spread across the city. Now, we were one base, but we were 19 locations. Right now, San Francisco, we're one base, but we're 11 locations. And we have rhythms, we get together on a regular basis, but it's not like a base that you get together every day. We get together maybe, 7, 8, 9 times a year, but we're focused. All right. So I won't talk too much about that, but some of you that are in this course may be macro city coordinators. What I want to talk about the most here is what I call micro-focused leadership. And micro-focused leaders, I'm going to explain this in a little bit, have a clear focus and strategy for a people, a place, or a passion of society. And I will define these in a little bit. So just hang with me. It will become clear. Secondly, they have a macro vision in their micro focus. So the project develops in diversity. 1990, I think it was 1999 in Chennai, one of our micro focus leaders started a leprosy ministry, Anil and Rose Kumar. And it started so simple, just washing the feet of lepers and bandaging their wounds. Beautiful, started simple. But because they started so simple, it was just a simple service act. And they would go out into the villages. And that's what they did. They washed the feet. They took off their bandages. They dug the rocks out of their sores, cared for them. Lepers began to respond with, why are you touching our feet? And Anil and Rose would say to them, we're touching your feet because there's a God in heaven that wants to touch your heart. But first, he's called us to touch your feet. And lepers began to just break down in tears and cry. You can see Anil here. I have a picture of him with his mask on, digging the rocks out of the ulcers of the lepers' feet where they have no feelings. And the rats come in at night and chew on their toes, and they lose their length of their toes. And the lepers say to Anil, why are you doing this? Nobody touches our feet. Nobody drinks from our well. Nobody eats our food. Nobody comes even near us. He said, because I'm touching your feet because there's a God in heaven that wants to touch your heart. But first, God has called me to touch your feet. And that started with a simple act of service, you see. But it then developed. So many lepers came to the Lord that we had to start a leprosy DTS. And then the leprosy DTS turned into a church planting school. And then it went to an orphanage program. And I think today, I don't know how many this ministry is in YWAM and out of YWAM. It's grown so big. But at one time he had, and I think it's more today, he had 50 people, 50 people on his staff in one micro focus. So the point here that I'm making is that micro focus leaders, they have a macro vision in their micro focus. Their focus is leprosy, but they've got a DTS, a leprosy DTS. They've got a church planting leprosy training program. They've got a primary health care outreach. They got an orphanage ministry. These are not small people. I've got a leader here in San Francisco, Ruthie Kim. She leads our ministry, separate, interdependent ministry. You can look it up on the internet. It's got its own website. I'm going to put it in the chat channel for you. It's called Because justicematters.org. There you go. She's got 12 people on her staff. I don't know how many interns now. This is not a small ministry. And Ruthie, she speaks in the mega churches in the city. I don't even get a chance to speak in the mega churches in the city. She's rocking. I mean, but she's not looking at the whole city. She's looking at women who are suffering sexual exploitation in the city, or domestic violence, or families that are being neglected. Females. Powerful, powerful, powerful ministry. It's multifaceted, but it's micro in focus. All right. And then thirdly, they can gather others around them in a team effort with people skills and character that builds disciples and long-term commitment. I'm not going to focus on this. I think Jim Orig talked quite a bit about this. And I know that Andreas and others talked about some of these things. So micro-focus leaders. Now, when you look at a city, we're looking at beautiful Barcelona, one of my favorite cities in the world. When you look at cities and you see them, they're massive. They're huge. They're overwhelming. And in fact, a lot of reasons why YWAMers stay away from cities or missionaries stay away from cities is because they're overwhelming. You just feel overpowered by the complexity of it. So here's how I like to look at cities. I like to look at cities through a pizza. I love pizza. But I like to look at, you can see my transparent pizza here with many slices. And I have three sections, three big quarters, or three big thirds, I should say, in my pizza called peoples, places, and passions. I already showed you this on our website. Because all cities are made up of these things. Now, when I say peoples, I specifically mean the peoples that are difficult for the church to reach, or peoples that the church is not reaching enough of. All right, so by peoples, I'm just putting some peoples here into the Barcelona pie chart. Not all of them, but the Pakistanis, the Gypsies, the Moroccans, the Muslims, the Algerians, the Bengalis. YWAM often goes where no one has gone before. And I think that's our anointing. And the world has changed from 1960 especially to present. The 1040 window got a pair of wheels and it moved into our Western cities. You know, if you go to London, they say the British Empire, Ray Bakke says the British Empire once ruled 54 nations. And all those nations now can be found in London. And Ray Bakke calls it the Empire Strikes Back syndrome. Germany once built a railroad down to Turkey, and now all the Turks are inside of Germany. Not all the Turks, a huge population of Turkish people are inside of Germany. Holland once ruled Indonesia, and now we have Indonesians back in Holland. The Empire Strikes Back. So when I'm referring to peoples, I'm referring to especially unreached people groups. Someone's asking the question, Lucy, on the chat. Thank you, Lucy, in the private channel there. I'm especially referring to unreached peoples, but it doesn't have to be limited to that. It could be skateboarders, but that's going to come in a little bit here. You'll see it. You could put skateboarders here because skateboarders are like a tribe in themselves. So let's look at a few cities. Here's Prague. And again, this data may not be totally up to date right now. I think this is 2017 data that I'm putting out, but these are some of the what I call strategic peoples of Prague. And so, you know, you start finding people from Uzbekistan, 10,000 people from Vietnam, 10,000 people from Vietnam living in Prague, the Republic of Czechoslovakia. 10,000 people. Now think about that for a little while. Missiologists tell us there should be one church for every 1,000 people. All right, I'm sorry. There should be one church for every 1,000 people. That's what missiologists tell us. It doesn't mean that all 1,000 people go to one church. But if you want to reach people, you got to be thinking one church for every 1,000 people. A church that speaks their language, a church that relates to their cultural distinctives, a church within walking distance of every person. That's especially when you go into India. Maybe not so much in Europe because you have a great transportation system. But going back to Prague, keeping that in mind now, what I just said, 10,000 people from Vietnam. How many churches, how many Vietnamese churches do we need? Well, if it's one church to 1,000, how many churches do we need? How many Vietnamese churches should we have? 10, right? So here's a question for the, I don't know how to say it, the Pragueites, that are on the call. How many Vietnamese churches does Prague have?
I would say, I think there's one or two, and that's it.
Okay,
And they were started by Koreans.
great, wonderful. Praise God.
Hallelujah.
I am so excited to hear what you just shared. 2 Vietnamese churches. I was expecting 0. Oh, praise God. And started by Koreans. What a beautiful match of Koreans. You can see here, Korea, 374 Koreans inside of Prague. That is I call Koreans strategic because they are more than 25% Christian. And they need to be mobilized to the unreached in these places. So what a great example of Koreans in Prague reaching the Vietnamese. All right. So look at Barcelona. It becomes now overwhelming. When you start looking at the people groups, the Berbers, look at the Berbers up here, 111,000. How many Berber churches do we have? Look at the Pakistanis, 11,886. How many Pakistani churches do we have? The empire strikes back. The 1040 window is at our doorstep. Mission is no longer crossing the ocean. Mission is crossing the street, says Dr. Ray Bakke. Look at Amsterdam. You go on and on here. So, know your city. Know it. Know it. And when you know it, you're going to pray for it. When you pray for it, you're going to cry for it. And when you cry for it, you're going to start ministries in it. I think sometimes the biggest lack we have in YWAM is just understanding our context. We understand intercession, and I believe in intercession, but intercession without informed research doesn't go real far. Okay, the research helps us. All right. So peoples, number 1, peoples. Number 2, places. All right. So what do I mean by places? I'm really picking on Prague, but maybe it's because I'm of my roots of my family coming from Czechoslovakia. But look at Prague. Get get your city and study it. Then look at the districts of Prague. 22 districts, and inside of these districts are older areas, and I forget what they call them. If someone in Prague can help me, I think it's called Kadastras or something. I'm sorry. If anybody on Prague knows what I'm talking about, speak up or put it in the chat channel. But you see the districts here, like number 22. Then surrounding it here are older neighborhoods that were in an earlier demarcation that they used to use, but now they've clumped them together. So the questions we have to ask are, what are the uniqueness? Are some of these areas unique? Oh, or for instance, where do the Vietnamese live in Prague? Are they all over, or do we find them in section 13? If they're in section 13 and we want to reach Vietnamese, and YWAM is living over in section 16, it's difficult to go from section 16 to section 13. The bigger the city, the more difficult it becomes. So, what we do here at YWAM San Francisco is, if I have a person that wants to reach the Vietnamese in section 13 and I'm in section 16, I get a nice shoe and kick them out of the base and say, go live in section 13 or 8. I'm sorry, that's 18 up there. I'm squinting Can't see the numbers on my own PowerPoint. All right, go live in section 18 and start a ministry there. Take some of the staff, recruit them, and go live there. We're still YWAM Prague, but you're section 18 and I'm section 16. But we'll support one another. All right. So places are distinct areas. Look at my city. These are my neighborhoods, and I'm located here. We have one ministry. We have two ministries here. We have another ministry here, and we have another ministry here. All right. These two ministries here are focusing on the poor. And we're starting a third ministry to the Yemeni people here. This one here, this is from here to here is a 30-minute walk. This here is the upper class Italians of our neighborhood, of our city. And we have a YWAM couple for the past 8 years that are living here in this neighborhood. And they've become the pastors of the neighborhood. The homes around them start at 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million US dollars. And the YWAMers are living in a little shoebox apartment. And the rich upper class people of the neighborhood are coming to their apartment for dinners. It doesn't matter that they can't live at the same level that they are. They have built bridges in 8 years' time of love to the upper class people. All right, so places. So again, using Barcelona, I'm putting in some of the neighborhoods of Barcelona. See? And it's not only neighborhoods, guys. It's universities. Universities are places. You want to reach a university? It's a city in itself. You know, here in San Francisco, we have Berkeley, 40,000 people. We're trying to start a university discipleship training school on the campus. Students living together, studying in classes, lectures once a month. We're using the Oslo model. We already have a DTS started in the city of San Francisco. That's 11 months long. We only take students who are residents of San Francisco and have jobs. We keep them in their jobs, and we have classes once a month. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We get in 12 hours of teaching, just the same amount of teaching that you do in a normal DTS, but it takes us 11 months, and they're on outreach locally. Our present DTS has a lawyer, has a person from the hotel industry, has an architect. They're all residents of San Francisco. They're in their jobs. We're following the Oslo model, and it's an approved accredited DTS. It's taken us a long time to work it through the U of N. But the reason we're doing it is because we're trying to think, how do we reach our city? How do we reach our city? How do we reach our city? All right, so next we're looking at doing it at the universities. Or it could be companies like Googleplex. Mountain View Googleplex, 15,000 employees. I spoke at Cisco a little while back, one of the big companies of San Francisco. They invited me, the Christian Fellowship, and I came to speak to them. And I did a prayer walk with one of the employees in the building, just walking and looking at and commenting to him. I'm sorry, I didn't do a prayer walk. I talked to him about prayer walking in the building, firing him up to see the building as a mission field. And then he took me to the fellowship. And I spoke, and there were only 2 people, 2 Christians in the whole company. And it was one of the most exciting times I ever had. knowing that it's a mission field. All right, so peoples, places. Now, this is where you're microing down. We need micro-focus leaders in a neighborhood, micro-focus leaders among a people group. Okay? Micro-focus leaders in people, in places, and then micro-focus leaders in what we call passion. So this is where the skateboarder starts coming in. Okay, someone said we're not seeing your cursor. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the chat of the chat here. All right, I love your question, Dina and Johannes. I'll try to get to that one. We are moving to a nation that has no established YWAM work and have been given the advice to keep the focus narrow in the beginning, making sure we are not going in too many directions. What would your advice be? I'll come back to that. And if I don't, I will correspond with you or Zoom with you, but I hope to say something about that. All right, so people, places, and then the third one is what we call passions. So passions could be skateboarding. It could be mime. It could be fashion. It could be arts and music. It could be sports. Could be media. And you can break these down even more. You can break these down even more. You know, just arts. You could go arts, fine art. You could go handicrafts. When I was in India, I started a handicraft store that had a missional purpose behind it. And I was interacting with potters and silk chain stitchers and stone crushers, people that were making figurines out of crushed stones, and painters and jewelry. And they were just amazed to come into my handicraft store and begin to talk to me about, why are you doing this? And then for me to admire their art, and then to start talking to them about Jesus. So, you know, this becomes huge. YWAM calls these the 7 spheres of society, but there's much more than 7. There's much more than 7. And, you know, I'm careful of that word, the 7 mountains or whatever it is. You want to be careful of a domination theology. We are servants in the spheres of society, stewarding those spheres, stewarding the relationships, and bringing the love of Jesus into that atmosphere. All right. So here the key is really micro focus, really micro focusing down, and starting ministries inside of these categories. So why don't we take 5 minutes and break up into groups and process some of what we've heard. And I'd like you to process, thank you. So Roger said, hi, Tim, just a reference for your Prague map. In Prague, the old name remained as the name of Cadastro. I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Appreciate that. Break up into small groups and maybe just process. What's the difference between a micro and a macro leader? And then process, give some examples of macro and micro leaders. And you can also go to, let me just see here if I can do this for you. You can go to my YouTube channel. Let me see if I can find it here. So yeah, there's on my YouTube channel, I'm not sure how you find that, but Tim Svoboda. And if you go to micro focus leaders, there's a little section called micro focus leaders. And I put some videos inside the micro focus leaders. The longest one there is 13 minutes. That's a really good one, but I'm just going to give you about 5 minutes to look at some of these videos. Like for instance, Because Justice Matters, 3 minutes. Otto Raja, Bangalore. There's 2 of them, I think, that are in here. One is in Spanish and one is in English. CNN hero, Teresa Goins. That's not a YWAMer, but it's a girl here in our city that is running a restaurant, a business as mission restaurant. This message from co-founder Joe Clendeni is the leprosy ministry. That's linked with another organization. And then these other 2 that are down here are from YWAM Cartagena. They're in Spanish. Just pick a video, watch it together, and then talk. What am I a micro focus leader? Am I a macro focus leader? And process a little bit what I've talked about. So we'll give you at least 5 minutes. How about 7? Can you find my YouTube? Let me see if I can. I don't know if I.
I've shared it.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. Any feedback from you guys? Let's see. Everybody's going into rooms.
Room, and I really battled, what in the world are we doing here? And I was more excited about coming than Tim, but when reality hit of how hard it was, I wasn't sure I wanted to be there. And so we battled through a lot of different things, and then the Lord really just came through, and he gave me the same, he put in my heart the vision, fully the vision of what we were doing and why we were doing it. My circumstances didn't change, but because my heart had changed, I was able to be fully in, though nothing changed from the day to day. But it's so, so important, especially as a married couple, that even if you're not doing the same thing, you've got the same heart in pioneering.
Yeah. 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 I think one of the word of advice we would have is, if you're not married and you're going to pioneer, and you do get married, make sure you're both pioneers. Because it can get really rough. And our early years in India, we were really financially broke, really financially broke. And we often were crying out to God for finances and complaining, but we really look back now and are so thankful that we were so broke, because it made us work at a level that was much more on the level of our dear Indian brothers and sisters who were more broke than we were, but we weren't so far ahead that we could fast together with them, we could trust God together with them, we could lay on the floor and cry out to God together with them. And many years ago when I went to Central Asia, they asked me to speak on how did YWAM India raise up so many Indians. And I asked our Indians, I said, why did you join YWAM? And they all went back to the early days and said, we remember when we were all broke together, crying out to God on the floor for our next meal. And we became family. And that's what bonded us together with those that were not from India and those that were from India. And then we started multiplying. So God in his wisdom, sometimes we complain, but in his wisdom, he knows what's best for us. So anyway. All right, there's maybe there are other questions.
Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, maybe there's other questions. I saw one question in here about, you're talking about multiplying YWAM in the city, but why not churches? And then somebody also asked, can you talk about how to reach the city? So let me just say really briefly here, without going into great detail. I've been studying city transformation movements since 1995. And I've been a part of city transformation movements since 1995 to this present day. And in my estimation, there are 3 streams of city transformation. And for a city to be transformed, all 3 have to be functioning. I'm only sharing with you on one stream in this time. So the 3 streams are prayer and revival. There has to be a prayer movement in the city, a united prayer movement across denominations. And that prayer movement may be concerts of prayer, maybe prayer walking, maybe pastors' prayer summits. I'm not going to go into detail about all these things, but I can. Prayer stations. There's all kinds of prayer that has to be going on. Prayer and revival. Prayer and revival. They're connected. That's the first stream. The second stream is what we call mobilization. And mobilization is like, it can be large events where Reinhard Bonnke, bless his heart, who's no longer with us, comes to a city and he does a massive meeting where, you know, thousands of people hear the gospel. Or it could be a coordinated research effort that's researching the city. And the purpose of research is to mobilize the body of Christ. So it could be research, it could be a massive outreach, or it could be like a Lawrence project, Bible distribution. And we do a Bible distribution program across the whole city. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is what we call incarnational. Sorry for the big word. But what does incarnation mean? Incarnation means he came from heaven to earth. He left his zip code and came to our zip code, our postal code. He left his culture and came to our culture. That's what I'm talking about. I'm only dealing with number 3. That a city to be transformed, there has to be a multiplicity of ministries. Now, how is a city reached? It's the whole body of Christ taking the whole gospel to the whole city. So all I'm doing today is talking about YWAM. I can't fit everything into the 5 hours or whatever hours I've been allotted. But I believe in the whole church. YWAM, you know, YWAM, one of the YWAM ministries in a city can be church ministries. We have a team in the other side of the Metroplex. That's all they're doing is they're running evening discipleship training courses in collaboration with local churches. And it's mobilizing the church. Pastors are excited about it. And that's all they do. That's the only ministry they do. They just run discipleship training, not schools, courses. I teach in a discipleship training course in Manhattan every year, in New York City. And it's rocking the place. I mean, the students that are in the course are, you know, I asked the student, what do you do? He says, oh, I'm a stockbroker at Wall Street. Next student, what do you do? Oh, I'm the vice president of the media department of Goldman Sachs. I'm like, my goodness, I'm talking to the, you know, the last course I spoke in just a couple of weeks ago in New York City by Zoom. One of the students in the course was the director of public policy for the mayor of New York City. I was like, goodness, you know, this is incredible. And they're recognized, YWAM in New York City, as a ministry that's really bringing transformation to the church. People in the church to mobilize them into ministry in their workplaces. Any questions? I'm trying to scroll. And so yes, there should be many churches engaged, and YWAM should be engaged with the church. I'm just not focusing on that in these lectures. I'm focusing on the third stream called incarnation. How do we reach our city? That's what I'm talking about. You know, the proliferation of many micro-focused ministries. Of the three streams, the prayer and revival, the mobilization and research, and the incarnation, I have dedicated myself more and more to the third stream. I'm very passionate about the third stream. Now, that doesn't mean the other two aren't right. It's just that I'm finding that's where my calling in the urban arena really resonates for me. Thank you from Brunei to help me with the data. Any questions? Okay, what are some ideas or for activities or projects to do during lecture phase of an urban focused DTS? Again, a lot of it depends on where the DTS is being held. You know, I did not start YWAM San Francisco. I inherited YWAM San Francisco, but the strategic location that our founder, Lori Matthias, she she leased the building dead smack downtown San Francisco in one of the toughest neighborhoods. And for our DTS, we have very few work duties. They do have work duties, but they're quite minimal, but we have a lot of ministry duties. So our students, like our girls, they join into our manicure day, and they do the nails, paint nails of the streetwalkers, prostitutes, and women that are suffering on the streets. And I'm telling you, it is a powerful, transformational ministry. When you're in a DTS and you're hearing about the Father Heart of God, and then you paint the nails of a woman that's being sexually exploited, and you're hearing their stories. You're not painting their nails, you're painting their hearts. And you're hearing it deeply. Our men and some of our women work in our homeless drop-in center. We run a drop-in center every day of the weekday. We offer showers, bathrooms, haircuts, dominoes, checkers, ping pong, pool, art therapy, Bible studies, prayer corner. We usually have somewhere between 25 and 50 people in our base that are unhoused in our main hall. And our students are interacting with them. The greatest joy for me is when I come to work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I live on the other side of the neighborhood. And I walk to work and I see a DTS student and they're sitting on the sidewalk sharing a cup of coffee with an unhoused homeless person. And I go, that's DTS. That's DTS. That's DTS. So those are some things that we do. There are other things that we do. We get involved in the local community. Our staff are all encouraged to be engaged outside of YWAM. I serve in the neighborhood as the chair of the Community Police Advisory Board. So the captain of our police station, him and I are friends, and I chair the advisory board that meets every month, that gives a crime report, and then solutions to how we're dealing with crime in our neighborhood. And I attend faithfully every month my captain's community gathering with our neighbors in the city. But other staff, they get involved, like some of our staff are on the board of the park, which is just behind the YWAM building. It's an inner city park and it's very challenging. And some of our staff are on that. And then some of our staff also serve in, there's an organization in our neighborhood called Safe Passage. We have 4,000 children living in our neighborhood, and there's drug dealing on every street corner. And with drug dealing comes gun violence. And so this organization has started a volunteers in the neighborhood to help the children cross the streets and get to school safely. So YWAM is very much involved with that organization. Our students volunteer as Safe Passage captains. My wife is on that committee. They're out in the neighborhood. And it's a way for us to interact with our neighbors and say YWAM is not just a inward focus. YWAM has an outward engagement in the neighborhood. So someone's asking, was it just two of you pioneering or you had a bigger team? When we went out and pioneered to India, we went on a team, I think it was about 12 people. And then when we re-pioneered in 1983, I was one of the leaders of the Honolulu School of Evangelism. And I took 21 students to Malaysia for 3 months. And I told the students beforehand, my wife and I told the students beforehand, we're going to Malaysia for 3 months, and afterwards we're going to India and we're not coming home. And whoever wants to join us, come. So about, I think, 8 or 9 joined us. And some lasted for a year and some for a couple of years, and some are still there. So that was a great way to start. When you say macro and micro in terms of describing someone's personal vision and therefore how they serve, do you believe that it's based off of their gifts and talents or rather off of a specific calling of the Lord? Yeah, that's a great question, Joel. Nuremberg, I am watching you guys in Nuremberg, man. I'm excited about your effort to try to raise money and buy that building. I believe in getting buildings for the kingdom of God in the heart of cities. That's a good question. I think it's I think it's both. There's a gift there's a gift of being a generalist. Lauren is a generalist, and I'm a generalist, but I'm a generalist when it comes to cities. I'm not a generalist when it comes to the whole world. Lauren's a generalist when it comes to the whole world. But I love cities. And I think that, yeah, I think that it's both. Now, like Ruthie, Because Justice Matters, if you watch that video, man, she's got a really strong gift of prophetic gift, teaching gift, evangelist gift. But then there's this micro focus to women. And I remember walking Ruthie through that calling in 2008. She had a vision from the Lord, and it was so simple. She said, I see two J's. I said, what are they? She said, Jesus and justice. And then we began to dream of what that would look like. And because Justice Matters was born. But she had a real gift of, she's very specific and targeted. So that's a good question. I got to think about that some more. Would you have time to say something about question about narrow versus broad focus in pioneering? Yeah. I'm not sure what else to say. Maybe you can ask me another question about it and I'll think of what to say. How do you keep the balance between trying to reach the whole city as a base while focusing on your own people, place, passion in different places? Yeah, you probably want to talk to my staff. Some of them want to throw me out of the base sometimes, because I'm thinking about the big picture and they're thinking about the lanes that they're in. And I've had to find, as a macro thinker of the city, to make sure that I'm super honoring of the micro focus leaders, and really staying in touch with them about their struggles, their victories, and the traction that they're getting. So I do that through multiple ways. And I'm not sure if I'm going to get time to talk about it, but we have twice a year an all-day review and evaluation of every ministry, not every location, every ministry in the Bay Area. So like, for instance, our homeless ministry would get at least 2.5 hours of very peer-to-peer review of their goals, their victories, their defeats, their finances. And it's not a commanding review. It's a mirror type of review where we're helping them to reflect. And that keeps me in touch pretty well. But then I'm also on the phone a lot, or on my motorbike. I'm a motorbike rider, so I ride out to their different locations and hear what's going on. Good questions, guys. Yeah, we're moving to a nation that has no established YWAM work and have been given the advice to keep the focus narrow in the beginning. Again, it depends on who you are. Who are you? And follow what the Holy Spirit says. Are you a micro leader? Are you a macro leader? And sometimes you don't know that without experimenting. And it's okay to fail. You fail forward. And you discover as you go along in these things. But it's really knowing, you know, and sometimes if you're a macro leader, the best way to start is to just start with a DTS. Because the DTS is kind of our, what's the term, for lack of a better term, it's our manufacturing unit for, for people that we don't do ministry with YWAM. So for many years in India, I just ran DTSs. From 1983 to 1995, I just ran DTS, 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 School of Evangelism, DTS, School of Evangelism, DTS. And then we started building ministries out of those things. But it took us time to get the momentum and the core leadership together. So sometimes the best thing to do is just start with a DTS. And then start dreaming about your city. And it may take years. Lauren Cunningham told me, I know I'm over time. Lauren Cunningham told me, or he told a group of us, I can't remember if it was me personally or a group of us. He said it takes about 5 years to pioneer a YWAM base. And when I went to India and I told that to some of my Indian colleagues from other organizations, they said, well, if Lauren told you 5 years, then times that by 3 for India. and figured it better be 15 years. And they were right. It was after 15 years that YWAM started getting established in India. And then we really started becoming more focused. So I wish I had a better answer, that you could do all this in a weekend, but it just takes a lot of time.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
I think we can take more questions. Maybe we will keep them writing here on the chat, and tomorrow you can come back to them. Is that okay?
Oh, please. I'm going to save my chat. And thank you. Great questions.
Okay.
A great course.
Thank you so much. But before we close, I would like 3 persons to say, like, briefly, what principles did you took out tonight from the whole teaching? Okay, so the principles, not just be short. 3 volunteers. Nobody?
I will. I'll share. I think for me,
Thank you, Lucy.
I've been challenged by my leaders that I have too much vision and too many projects. And it was really helpful to have the definition of the macro and the micro. And now for me, I can look and say, okay, who will I recruit to help me for those micro projects or the different areas of the city that I really feel that God is calling us to be involved with. So that's been really, really helpful. Thank you.
Great, Lucy. Thank you. Somebody else?
Yeah, I will share something. Thank you, Tim. You know, in India, I saw him from childhood, you know, age of 7. 7 or 8, I used to play in the bass sometimes because my brother studied over there in DTS. He took me over there. So after a long time, I'm hearing again from the Tim, you know, same principles. So here we are following the same principles in Dolby. I'm following what is done to us in India. So I'm his disciple. I'm carrying on his vision in Dolby.
Thank you, James and Mary. Bless you.
Thank you, Tim.
Tim.
I can share something. It really stuck out to me when you said mission is no longer crossing the ocean, it is crossing the street. Know your city. And I was just thinking to myself, like, how well do I know my city? And it's like, well, I know Serbs live here. I know that there are Roma gypsies who live here, but who else lives here? And like, what can I be doing to reach some more of those unreached people, lesser known people, and just like, what can we be starting to do that, and just really emphasizing research on where we're living, like do more in-depth research, kind of going along with, like, you're not going to go into battle without knowing the map. So that really stood out to me. So thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We let one more, just who really wants to say it.
Sure, I would love to say something. Thank you so much, Tim. We are from Biarritz, and we're looking into pioneering a base in Marseille. And I loved when you said, it gives me life as I feel God's heartbeat for the place and the city. I think it just, I really want to feel God's heartbeat for this city, but also Marseille, and just that really inspired me, your heart for the city, and And yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that, and even all the research that you've done is amazing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. One day I want to come to Biarritz.
Yes, you're welcome.
What a beautiful city.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tim, for the whole teaching tonight. You gave us so much to process. And I encourage you tomorrow, everybody, to just take time to think about the teaching that we just received, to enlarge our thinking, not just to think to what we know, how things are done or were done before, but let God to open our minds, okay? So take time to process. And yeah, I wish you a good sleep, and we will see.
Or a good day.
Or a good day for those that it's morning. Yeah, and see you tomorrow, okay?
And
Tomorrow.
can I just give a homework assignment?
Sure.
Please watch the video in the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, Slums of Madras. That will
Can you write it on chat? Slums of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just watch that video. It's only, I think it's a 13-minute video or something like that. And just watch that. Slums of Madras. It will show you the micro focus with the macro application. And when you watch that, see if you can count how many ministries in that slum ministry.
Okay.
How many ministries in that slum ministry?
Thank you. Great. Okay, see you tomorrow again at 5:30. Okay. Remember, being on time is already late. Andrea's code. And tomorrow we have a guest for the devotional time. His name is Marian Nitsu, and he's been for many years in India. Okay, so be in time, and yeah, recharge your batteries. Thank you, team. Thank you, everybody. We'll give it a minute to greet and say goodbye, everybody.
Thank you very much. It was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a
Thank you. Nice to see all of your lovely faces.
Yes, bye, Lucy.
Everyone.
See you
Bye,
tomorrow.
Prosper. Bye.
Awesome. Goodbye. До свидания.
Thank you, guys.
Adiós, amigo de México.